Sprint training is easily the most beneficial training activity that one can do in an effort to see immediate impact in one's performance in BMX racing. And in this video, we're going to discuss 3 reasons, 3 secrets as to why you guys should be sprint training right now in an effort to improve your speed, your acceleration, and start getting the whole shot, smashing people all the way to the finish line, and win more races. Let's go. Let's talk about it. What up? What is going on YouTube, BMX training, family, community? Welcome back to another Tuesday night edition of BMX Coach Live. I am your host, 3-time Olympic coach, Greg Romero. I'm live here in San Diego. Welcome back to the show. Man, it's been a rough couple weeks. I got sick. It wasn't COVID. It wasn't strep throat, but it had symptoms of like body aches, body chills, a headache, cough, and a lot of night sweats. It was really brutal, but you know, I got through it, missed a couple weeks. I was really thinking about you guys, and man, what a wonderful way to get back. It's beautiful here in sunny San Diego. It's awesome to see all your smiling faces that are back. A lot of people in the chat. That's what we're all about here at BMX Training, is helping you guys, and then you guys helping everyone else as well. Not only helping yourself, but helping everyone else within the community and also at your track. That's what it's all about, right? Life's all about helping people, helping our brothers, our sisters, our friends, our family, and also our fellow BMX racers as well. Hope you guys are doing well tonight. See a bunch of people in the chat again. Jack Baker, JP, Ashton Brown, Nathan BMX, Kenneth Murphy, Andrew Grando, Jason P, David Bloor. He says, let's go. Man, I am excited. I hope you guys are excited. Man, I'm doing really well. I want to hit record on my other camera right here. Hopefully that doesn't blow up the feed. Starting to get really good about, man, you know, just being the quarterback here, right? Running the camera, running the feed, running all this content, and then trying to entertain you guys simultaneously. It's not easy, man, I tell you what, but the more we do this, the more fun we're going to have. And man, today I really want to talk about sprint training, right? Like when it comes to training, when it comes to racing, the best way you guys to improve, obviously, is to ride your bike, right? Now, a lot of things that a lot of BMXers, what they like to do is just simply ride their bike at the track, go to practice, hang out with the friends, do some gates, do some first straights, shoot the crap with everybody else, go to the snack bar and eat some nachos and you know, hot dogs, whatever the heck you guys eat at the track. I know when I was a kid, I looked forward to those things. I don't know about you, but I looked forward to hanging out with familiar faces away from school and going to the track and having fun, doing gates, you know, playing with the older guys, doing gate practice, and then, you know, having a Gatorade, having nachos, watch some local races, perhaps do some local races myself, maybe perhaps jump into a pro-am. And you know what, that's all fine and dandy, but at the end of the day, it's hard to improve if you guys are just constantly doing the same thing at the track. Now, don't get me wrong, I think the track is an awesome place to improve. Obviously, working on your gates, working on your acceleration, working on jumping, manualing, turning skills. And if you guys race, you guys are always working on mastering your racing strategy as well as your skills. And so one of the things I want to talk about was training and doing that away from the track, because I think a lot of us, we tend to get into this normalized routine of, hey, going to the track is good enough. And for a lot of you guys, that is true. And for some of you guys that want to enjoy more progression, more performance, and, you know, win more races, right? Get faster, win more races. When you get faster, it's easier to ride your bike. It's faster, it's funner. Winning is fun, straight up. I mean, you know, let me tell you, winning is awesome. And when you don't win, the fun kind of goes down. Like if you're consistently not improving and you're struggling, then, you know, like your parents, yourself, it's not going to be as fun going to the track and hanging out with your friends and familiar faces and enjoying, that occasional soft drink, nachos, and whatever the heck you guys do at the local track. I know it's fun. I love it. And, I wanted to give you guys a great reason, right? Like we all need an awesome reason as to why we need to train away from the track, right? Like when no one's looking, when we can't enjoy those nachos, when we don't have jumps and we can't manual and all we have is our bike and a safe place to do a sprint, right? And do these boring repetitive sprints. But I wanted to give you guys the secrets, the power, the reason as to why it's so important, and also at the same time give you guys something that gives you immediate results almost instantaneously. I'm telling you, sprint training is an easy thing to do, and it's also easy not to do, so you guys might as well do it. Right? It's kind of like this show. It's kind of like, hey, I can easily do this. I can also easily not do it. But I love hanging out with the BMX community. I love giving back. So I might as well do it, right? Same thing with sprint training. Having a little bit of tea here. I got tea, I got water, I got everything. All right, so let's get into it, right? Sprint training secrets. One of the first things I want to talk about here is, number one, BMXers are sprint athletes first, right? Like you guys are truly sprint athletes. We tend to think of ourselves as guys that are cyclists, that ride our bikes and we're riding free and we're jumping, we're getting style, we're getting rad, and we're being awesome and cool because we're riding a freaking bike and we're representing ourselves and sometimes another team or teammate, and we're sponsored. But you guys, at the end of the day, if you guys were to compare yourselves to the normal sporting world, right? BMX is an Olympic sport. If you look at other Olympic sports, you guys are no different than sprint athletes on the track. You guys are no different than 200-meter hurdlers, okay? Now, 200-meter hurdlers or even 200-meter runners, they're sprinters. They're sprinters first, and they're jumpers, but they're jumpers second, because at the end of the day, if you guys can't accelerate out of the blocks, if you can't accelerate out of the gate, then what good is it, being able to, I shouldn't really downplay it that much, but what good is it if you're racing from behind and you don't consider yourself a sprinter and you're always dead last to the first jump into the first turn and all the way to the finish line? What good is it, right? Then you're just a glorified, freestyler that just likes to get on the gate and waste money and waste time and don't get me wrong, actually, I've been that way, like even a guy like Nick Long, who has come full circle, he doesn't even try in Vet Pro. He throws on flat pedals. He's done with the grind of putting in the time of gym work, sprint work, traveling, being serious, right? Being dedicated. He's done that all his life, right? He's 30-something years old, and he's been doing it for, 25 years, just grinding. And now he's finally having some fun from not being serious. But for the rest of us, right? For the rest of us that actually show up, listen, when you guys show up to the race, you guys are sprinting athletes. That's what you guys do. You guys are coming out of the gate and you're trying to get ahead of the competition, and you're trying to hold position and get to the front of the race, stay at the front of the race all the way to the finish line. And therefore, you guys are sprinting. Now, again, you guys are not judged based on style. You guys are judged simply on performance and what position you cross that finish line. So you guys are athletes, okay? Right? The objective here is to go as fast as you can. All right? That's what athletes do. Whether, think of any other sport, if it's football, if it's ice hockey, two of my other favorite sports, those guys are trying to be explosive as they can. A wide receiver is trying to outrun the cornerback. Okay. In ice hockey, you're trying to skate past the defenseman in an effort to get a clear shot on goal. All right. So I wanted to let you guys know that this is really important. This is a really important mindset that a lot of people struggle with. You guys are sprinting athletes. And I wish I would have known this, and I was told this when I was like 12, 13 years old, which were some of my hardest years of racing, right? when you're really young and you don't understand that, why do I have to train? I'm already going to the track. I'm already doing gates. I'm already putting in all this effort. I'm already racing. Like if you guys were to play, Pop Warner football or hockey, like they don't have you doing off the ice work, right? That doesn't really happen until like you graduate to other levels and higher levels of sport, right? Where where the team meets up for off the ice, off the track, off the field conditioning. And in BMX, the best way to improve is to do it away from the track. That's where you guys can make the biggest gains, and that's what athletes do. All right. Let's keep moving forward. Another important reason as to why sprint training is so important, why athletes are the way they are, is due to neuromuscular conditioning. All right. And I have my notes here. I wanted to kind of get a little bit nerdy on you guys. I think it's important. Sprinting is an all-out maximum explosive activity that involves the lower limbs to move at peak force and velocity, right? Peak force and velocity is essentially power. You guys are sprinting athletes that are trying to produce maximum power, and it's all about peak force, which is how much force you could put into the pedals out of the gate, and at what velocity, how fast can you actually pedal out of the gate down the first straight, and how fast can you pedal around the track. Okay, that's what peak power is all about, getting peak force and peak velocity of pedaling speed. Okay, and this explosive pedaling activity involves the recruitment of specific muscle fibers and muscle groups, and such as your quad, right? It has a bunch of your lower body, of your hip, knee, and ankle joint has muscles that surround those joints, right? You have the glutes, you have the adductors, and you have quads, you have hamstrings, you have calves, and you're using all the muscle groups involved around those three major hip joints that produce pedaling power, okay? And so when you're recruiting these muscle groups, you're working on improving the efficiency of firing patterns of those muscle fiber groups. Okay. So that means this type of motor learning, right? This motor learning that we're teaching our body to do, because we're not sprinting with our arms. Our arms have to hold on to the handlebar grips. So we're also using arm strength, upper body, lats, muscles between the shoulder blades, shoulders, and your core and lower back to stabilize yourself on the bike, right? Like you're still contracting, but it's more of a static contract, more than it is a dynamic, what we're doing with the lower body of the hip, knee, and ankle joints. And we're basically training and imposing this demand of coordinating all these movements, whether they're static or dynamic. And when we're doing these movements, we're basically recording and programming, and we're programming and recording neuromuscular conditioning, or otherwise I call it neurological programming. All right, so what did I write here? I said, this type of motor learning must be done at high powerful outputs or speeds to properly develop the complex recruitment of muscle fiber needed to fire in a synchronized pattern. Okay, so think of yourself coming out of the gate, how much of that is a synchronized pattern when you lead with your head and shoulders and your core is tight and everything is static up top, but then the lower body has to start dynamically exploding and kicking those pedals over in an effort to accelerate and out-accelerate the competition, right? And so this process is also referred to as neuromuscular conditioning, or what I call neurological programming. And the need of neuromuscular conditioning is key in developing and coordinating human speed and power on the BMX track. Think about that. That's why sprint training is important. We'll talk more. And then, so what did I say? If you're highly coordinated, this means your brain does not have to spend much time thinking to perform and execute a gate start movement followed by an acceleration. With training, muscle fibers will be able to fire in a coordinated pattern, resulting in quicker reaction times, faster acceleration, and higher top speeds. Ooh. This is essential when considering the amount of fine motor skill and coordination required in the routine movements of gate starts and maximum explosive pedaling. Psh, huge, right? Huge. Absolutely huge. How are we guys doing? You guys keeping up with me? Neuromuscular programming, sprint training. You guys are sprinting athletes. That's what you guys are doing. You guys are recording the program to neurologically, muscularly explode out of the gate. And these are coordinated, fine motor trained units, right? That have to fire in a coordinated pattern. So sprint training, not only will it make you faster, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to master sprint training, master acceleration to where you don't have to think about it. I was working with a client today, in fact, that they're in Australia, and a kid that wants to go to the World Championships. He has a goal. I think he's going to be 16, and we were talking about his goals of making the main, and he's talking about getting stronger, and he's talking about getting out of the gate and not getting shut down. And so we talked about how it's important for him to get faster so he doesn't have to think about not being fast enough, right? And that's going to happen through obviously strength training for him, but also sprint training. And sprint training is key because you're making it to where you don't need to think about it. Like when you're in the gate, you don't want to think about, okay, well, I have to pedal this fast. No, you should be mentally triggered to go one speed, and that is freaking all out, explosive, as fast as you can. That's it. All out, explosive, and as fast as you can. That's it. There is no, oh, well, I'm just going to go kind of like, 50% out of the gate and see what happens. And, maybe I'll start pouring it on full speed, maybe after the first jump. No, it's all out. It's all out or nothing. That's BMX. You guys are sprinting athletes. The objective is to get ahead of the competition because racing from behind sucks. All right. So you want to program it to where you don't have to think about sprinting. That's the whole point. You don't have to think about it. Once you guys master sprinting, then you guys can continuously improve body positioning to get more efficiency and power delivery to the pedals. Okay. I mean, that's a whole nother ball of wax when it comes to sprint training technique. But at the end of the day, if you're not sprinting, start now. Start doing some kind of sprint training now. Next thing I want to talk about is sprint energy system. Something that we don't really talk about a lot. Like we talk about gate starts, we talk about mechanics, acceleration positions, and first movement, and where your body position needs to be, getting into the second half crank and being super efficient. And we could talk about all that stuff all day long, but again, we need a real good reason, right? We need to program in our mind the reasons why we do it, because when we understand the reasons, then it's going to be easier for us to just say, you know what, today I need to do some sprint training. I was thinking about Coach G. He was saying, man, I need to work on being a sprint athlete and develop my muscle motor units and programming and coordinating and firing and mastery and doing it without thinking. And at the end of the day, that stuff is all great, but we have to understand, we have to have another good reason, and we need to understand sprint energy systems, because I think, when I was a kid, when I was sprinting, I was doing all kinds of goofy stuff all wrong, okay? And it made me hate, it absolutely made me hate sprint training, right? Like doing a bunch of work to where I want to throw up. And you know what? It doesn't need to be that way. You guys need to understand why you're doing it. And if you understand why you're doing it, then you could prepare and you guys could go deeper and you guys don't have to worry about suffering, right? Because like training, when we think about training, some people tend to think that training is suffering and suffering is training. And that's not always true, right? Because at the end of the day, it's all about having that mindset as to why you're doing it, okay? And then understanding that a sprint athlete needs to be specific, needs to be explosive, the movement needs to be coordinated, and you don't need to train a whole lot, right? Like you don't need to train for hours on end. You know, like you don't need to do sprint training for 3 or 4 hours. That's not the play here. That's not the game. So let's talk about sprint energy systems. Okay, and let's go over my notes. So bear with me. When it comes to BMX racing, there just seems to be one type of sprinting, and that is going all out. While that is true in a short event, if you want to enhance any specific part of the track, your first straight, your acceleration out of the last turn, your ability to generate speed from the first turn to the finish line, etc., then we must adhere to energy rules of the body and sprint train within those energy parameters, okay? Without going too sport specific on you guys, it's important to know the metabolic pathways and how they affect and influence your racing, influence your sprinting effort, right? So first off, BMX is very much an anaerobic sport, okay? Given the time duration of under 60 seconds, and anything after 60 seconds, it's going to be considered an aerobic sport. Now, the difference between anaerobic and aerobic is simply the presence of oxygen, right? To help facilitate metabolic waste. So what does that mean? Does that mean in BMX we cannot breathe? No, absolutely. You need to breathe, but keep in mind you're also at an oxygen debt, right? Like you're already behind. So yeah, of course you need to breathe, but that breathing is not doing you of any immediate benefit of cycling out metabolic waste, otherwise known as lactic acid. Okay, we'll talk about that more here in a minute. Let's comb through this real quick. So again, anaerobic versus aerobic. Okay, so think of a 100-meter sprinter or a 100-meter sprinting race that lasts 10 seconds versus, say, a 1-mile race that might take 4 to 5 minutes to compete. Okay, that's pretty much anaerobic versus aerobic. Is everyone with me? Is that helpful? Does that make any sense? Okay, now that we understand the difference, let's go deeper. Okay, let's go a little bit deeper. For the first 10 seconds of a race, your body is using an energy source, ATP-CP, which stands for adenosine triphosphate creatine phosphate. Okay, adenosine triphosphate creatine phosphate. Say that 3 times. Without nerding out too hard here, basically this is the fuel required to do short maximum burst, right? This is the fuel, okay? And this ATP-CP stuff is actually in your muscles, right? That's where it's readily available. And the pros of the energy system, the energy is readily available, right? Like when I contract, boom, when my eyes blink, that's ATP. If I want to start jumping up and down out of my seat right here, that's ATP for the first 10 seconds, provided I'm going all out for the most part, right? Being explosive here. We're talking about explosive for the first 10 seconds. The cons is that, listen, that fuel will only last you 10 seconds, and it requires 3 minutes, right? Typically 3 minutes to recover or replenish ATP-CP energy stores in the muscles. Wow, 3 minutes. Yeah, So, think of the first 10 seconds of a typical track from the gate to just about out of the first turn. That's 10 seconds. After that, it's done. It's gone. You only have about 30 seconds left in a 40-second race, right? Like if you were to watch the Grands, 10-year-olds are going from the gate, and that was a very short first straight, to the just past the first jump. I was just timing it the other day, just past the first jump out of the first turn. For older guys like pros, 10 seconds is going into the second turn, in and out, done. After that, you got 30 more seconds, and you don't have 3 minutes to recover ATP-CP, which is, we're talking about the phosphagen fuel system. You don't have 3 minutes to recover more of that stuff, that explosive stuff, the killer instinct stuff. So at that point, after 10 seconds, you basically go into a glycotic state where you start burning sugar, and sugar comes from all kinds of different fuels like the kidneys, and other areas of the body. But we'll get to that here in a moment. So bear with me, and we'll talk more about the glycotic system, because that's another system that we need to focus on as it pertains to performance from the first turn all the way to finish line. But let's focus on the performance from the gate for the first 10 seconds. Okay, so if you want to enhance this area of your sprinting, you will want to be under 10 seconds all out, and you will want to rest at least 3 minutes for full recovery. So that means for, if you're at the track and you guys are doing gates to the first turn with some buddies, and then after the first turn, you guys shut it down, you kind of BS your way around the rest of the track, walk back up staging, go behind the gate and wait. That's typically about three minutes. Okay. And, that's more than enough time to have fully recovered ATP CP, that phosphagen dynamite explosive energy that you need to maximally produce and perform for another gate to the first turn. Now, if you were to do a full lap, you're going to need more recovery. And we'll talk about that here in a moment, because that's a whole nother energy system. So you're needing to recover a couple energy systems here, but we'll jump to that in a moment. Again, I want to focus on the first 10 seconds here. So 3 minutes full recovery. Keep this in mind when it comes to the neuromuscular conditioning rule, right? Remember a moment ago, we talked about neuromuscular conditioning, programming, right? Which is basically the pathways of the brain programming electronically the coordination of what muscles need to be fired here, right? So if you guys were to do all out sprints and rest, less than a minute, you guys are actually going to underperform on the subsequent sprints. And at the end of the day, you're going to be programming yourself to go slower. That's why resting 3 minutes is key. That's why when coaches like myself tell you to rest 2 to 3 minutes or even longer for full recovery, even in the gym, even if you're doing squats of 85% and above, even if you're doing plyometrics, you guys got to recover. Now, how much you need to recover, that, it depends. It depends on the length of within that 10 seconds. But, I think the general rule of thumb in track and field sprinting is typically 1 minute for, is it 1 minute for every 10 meters? So if you guys are doing a 5 full crank sprint, which is about 20 meters, listen, that's 2 minutes, but I would go for the full 3. Why not? Okay, so again, I want to say, if we don't have maximum ATP CP readily available for our next effort, then you're not going to be performing at your maximum power potential. This is why rest between gate start efforts, first straight efforts, sprinting efforts is so important. It's not about not being tired. Oh, I'm not tired. I can just go again. I mean, that's what kids do. Oh, I can just keep going. Even adults, I can just keep going. Shoot, I'm only pedaling for literally 3 or 4 seconds, 5 seconds. What, what's the big deal? It's a big deal. Because again, it's not about not being tired, and you could just keep going and going with very little rest. It's about the neuromuscular conditioning and programming. All right. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's keep finishing this up. We're getting a couple thumbs up here. Getting questions. We're gonna talk to you guys here in a moment. Hope you guys are doing well. Looks like we got like 30 viewers. Oh, man, this is great. We need to get to like 300, man. That would be epic. Keep firing those questions. Keep coming up with thoughts as I'm talking and taking notes, and fire the questions off into the chat. And that way we can get to it after this. That's always the funnest part, right? All right, so let's talk about the energy requirements for the rest of the lap, from the first turn all the way to the finish line. Anything after 10 seconds and for the remaining 30 seconds of your lap, because your average lap is about 40 seconds, give or take, whether you're a pro or whether you're a 6-year-old beginner, it's the give or take is 40 seconds, obviously. At the end of the day, we're talking probably a difference of anywhere from 5 to 8 seconds between proficiency sometimes on the extreme ends. But excuse me. At that point, after 10 seconds, you guys are using what is called the anaerobic lactate glycotic energy system, right? We'll just refer to it as, well, you could look at it as lactate, or you could call it glycotic. And glycotic means basically there's glycogen in your muscle cells as well, which is sugar. Okay, that's basically what it is. And this means, this lactate, right? This lactate that we produce, this metabolic waste, is basically unbroken down glycogen in the way of, it's called lactic acid, and it will present itself in the muscles and bloodstream, and this lactic acid fatigues the muscle. It makes it heavy. You guys might even feel pain. Your legs might start to feel heavy and slow. Okay, this is the presence of lactic acid in the muscles and the bloodstream. And in an effort to train this area and enhance your performance in the way of tolerating lactic acid, and as a result, enabling your legs to produce more pedaling power from the first turn to the finish line, you could do sessions that raise your lactate threshold, your ability to tolerate lactate. Now, we'll talk about a couple different things here, because I think this is really important. If you guys are taking notes, great. Now, doing longer sprints could work, although they would have to be really long, over 10 seconds, because you'd have to get past that ATP-CP, deplete the ATP-CP explosive stuff, and then you got to start working into the lactate stuff. And man, and that's where sprint training gets really hard, right? Like, when I was a young kid, it's like, hey, Greg, you got to sprint up that hill, and it's like freaking really long, and it takes me, well over a minute, and my legs are burning, and I'm breathing hard, and everything hurts, and there's lactic acid in my legs and in my lungs and in my arms. Even today, as a cyclist, sometimes we do these crazy efforts with these groupies, with the group rides, right? I'm riding and doing these group rides on my road bike with other high performance racers, and these guys will hammer me up a hill, and I'm staying with them. And it'll get to the point where my heart rate's all the way through the roof. My legs are heavy. They feel slow. They're burning. And at the same time, I'll even feel it in my freaking arms. And I'm like, what is that all about? Like, this hurts really bad. And it's not like I'm using my arms. Just that acid, it's just going everywhere. That lactate is happening, man. I am burning glycogen like no other. And the problem is I'm at an oxygen debt, and I cannot facilitate that lactate fast enough. I can't remove it from my system. And so I have to be able to do those kind of efforts repeatedly in an effort to tolerate the pain, right? Now, to be more specific, at the track, you guys could go and do longer efforts. Obviously, you guys could go past the first turn and all the way to the finish line, or you guys could start with half lap work, right? Like, obviously half lap will be longer than 10 seconds, and you guys are going to touch on that glycotic energy pathway, right? Like, I can recall the last time I was actually preparing for the last race that I did in BMX, which was the World Championships. I remember down here at Chula Vista, I was training with Tyler Brown, and we were both doing half lap work because, when you guys do the World Championships, even as an amateur, if you get through all the motos and all the single elimination rounds and go all the way to the finals, the way, every racer wants to, you have to be able to have that glycotic anaerobic lactate system trained, because at the end of the day, it's all about being recovered for that next lap. If you guys are not recovered for that next lap, forget about it. That's where training comes in handy, is making sure that you have all that metabolic waste out of the way. You have all those excuses out of the way, right? That's what training's for, is to remove that excuse of the engine being the limiting factor, okay? And being able to be recovered in an effort to perform my maximum potential out of the gate again and again. Again, we do those short sprints, but we also have to earn our ability and we have to earn our ability to perform around the track and repeat that process over and over and over again, even on a normal race day when you guys have a lot of time. Like the Grand Nationals, you have a lot of time to recover. So you probably don't need to worry about too much about, unless it's a really long track, then you don't need to really worry about your ability to repeat effort after effort like pros do. But when you guys go to the World Championships, if some of you guys are going to the Worlds, it's all about being able to recover, okay? And so that's where doing, longer efforts at the track. Also at the same time, like, even if you guys don't even ride a whole lot, but you guys go out there and do 1 or 2 or 3 laps, that main event, you still want to be able to remove all that metabolic waste, even if you have a lot of time. So it's good for you guys to do this kind of training. Another way to train this at home away from the track is to do what I call broken sprints, right? Broken effort sprints that mimic the demands of pedaling intermittently. So that means 3 to 5 seconds on of pedaling, rest a few seconds, coast, and then repeat the process, and then do this for at least 30 seconds total, right? I would probably say more like 20 to 30. You could start with 20 seconds, and you guys should be able to get at least 2 or 3 sets of anywhere from 3 to 5 seconds of pedaling. And and then having a short rest, right? A short rest would be something, for something like a broken sprint, maybe 3 or 4 minutes at the most, because you want to be able to perform the sprint while you're in an oxygen debt, while there's still waste in your legs, because you want to be able to tolerate that pain. You want to be able to perform with lactate in your legs, right? That's the thing. Now, keep in mind that if you're not trained well, and you guys don't do this kind of work, and you guys just go out and just do the normal practice sessions and then local race night, it would be totally beneficial for you guys to do additional working on your ability to tolerate lactic acid in your legs, especially from, say the second turn all the way to the finish line. Because the more you could tolerate it, then the more performance, the more power that you guys can put into the pedals all the way to the line. It's awesome. All right, so I think that's more than enough reasons as to why sprint training is super important. We talked about you guys being sprint training athletes. We talked about the importance of neuromuscular conditioning, and then we talked about the energy pathways, right? The phosphagen, the ATP-CP, the adenosine triphosphate, creatine phosphate, and then also the anaerobic lactate glycolytic energy system. All right, so let's go to the questions. Let's get that fired up. I'll see you guys back after the break. Let's go, guys. Hey guys, I have a question. What would it do for you if you could enhance your power out of the gate, enhance your sprint speed down the first straight, enhance your skills, enhance your mental performance mind state? What would that do for your racing or your kids' racing? If you're seeing the value of enhancing your BMX performance, consider joining the community of BMX Training Pro and get the same access my Olympic athletes have enjoyed, as well as thousands of BMXers all over the world. Some members use the access to improve their gate start techniques. Some also use the access to keep them motivated to train, and you'll find your reason when you gain access and join BMX Training Pro today.
Stay focused, get ready now. For real, get ready now.
Nitro with the nice flow.
Stay focused, get ready now. For real, get ready now. Let's go. Stay focused, hear the heat come. Concentrate to the sound of the beat drum. Yeah. Start it up, take it back now. Check it out. This is how it's going down. Yeah.
All right, guys. Hey, welcome back. That was a quick break. Hope you guys are doing well. We got a couple guys in the comments here. I see right off the hop, just chilling, avoiding the gym. He must be talking to somebody else. I think that's pretty funny. That was the first thing I saw. JP has a question here. Man, I wish I had reading glasses. He says, hey, coach, how many sprinting sessions is too much? Well, that's a really good question. That means, how many sprint sessions are we talking about? Are we talking about how many sprint training sessions a week? Because it could get really confusing as to what you need to do, right? Like, there's only 7 days in a week, and sometimes we like to go to the track a couple times a week. Some of you guys like to go to the gym, squeeze in a sprint training session here and there, and that's a lot. And you need to have at least a couple days of rest in there. All of a sudden, we're up to 7 days, and I only counted 2 sprint training sessions in there if you're lucky. Now, if you go to the gym, you could probably do sprints before the gym or even after the gym. Try that. But typically, when it comes to sprint training, I like to personally, especially if we're working for the first 10 seconds and we're working on being cognizant of that neuromuscular conditioning, we're looking for that quality, then I like to go into a sprint training typically fresh, right? Like fresh, where I'm feeling like my muscles are not sore, right? Because that's another thing. If your muscles are sore from a workout, from either being at the track, doing racing, doing strength work in the gym, if you're sore, then your muscles are not going to perform as well. So when it comes to quality sprint training, I like to go in fresh. So when you think about that, when you think about working on high quality sprint training, going in fresh is key. How many days a week can you go into a sprint training fresh? Now, looking at the general rule of thumb, sprint training athletes typically need anywhere from 36 to 48 hours recovery, right? That's like a day and a half to 2 days, and sometimes 3 days. So you have to adhere to how you feel in terms of recovery, like in terms of your muscles. And then, of course, the day before, did you do something else that can potentially fatigue you, whether that's neuromuscularly, metabolically, or even a lack of sleep, right? So it gets really confusing. I know I probably didn't answer that the way you'd want to hear it, because people would just want to say, the rule of thumb is to sprint 3 times a week, man, and that's really good. And it's like, okay, well, you got to give me more context, man, because you need rest. What kind of sprints are you doing? Are you integrating strength work? Are you going to the track? What days are you practicing gates at home? What days are you guys doing track work? What days are you guys racing? I mean, there's so much to think about, right? I know I spoke about it earlier, right? Like we're sprinting athletes. What other questions do we have? Here we go, Jason P. Jason P asks, how to best balance flat ground uphill and downhill sprints? Great question. It depends on your needs, right? Like if you're looking to improve acceleration out of the gate, okay, when you think about acceleration out of the gate, it's 2 components. It's force and velocity. Now, in terms of flat ground and uphill sprints, that's pretty much tackling force. If you were to do flat ground, you're tackling force with some velocity, but when you do uphill sprints, you tend to change that force, you tend to change that power force curve, right? Like, so all of a sudden, if you go uphill, it's going to require more force and less leg velocity. Now, if more force is something that you want to tackle, then yeah, uphill sprints, like you don't need to do uphill sprints and flat ground sprints on the same day. Just do uphill sprints, right? Maybe try that for 2 or 3 weeks, see how you adapt. And then when you're ready, go ahead and start doing flat ground sprints and bring in, after you've already developed more force, go ahead and start bringing in more velocity, right? More pedaling, speed, discharge, okay? That's how I would look at it. Now, downhill sprints, that's a whole nother animal. And I look at downhill sprints, obviously, working on top end leg speed, right? Like raising your ceiling. So I would do that another different day. And I would try to do that. Now you could do that on a day like after a gym session, or even if you have a dedicated day of, like some of my athletes have a gate at home, so they practice gates, and then I might throw in 4 or 5 downhill sprints after that. in an effort to work on their top end leg speed. And you don't need to do many downhill sprints, because if you're not careful, you're going to start training something else that's different. Because I look at downhill sprints as strictly raising the governor, how fast your legs can actually pedal, raising that ceiling. Because it's unrealistic that you guys will ever pedal that fast at a track by doing downhill sprints. And so you don't really need to do a whole lot of those. And so downhill sprints, again, I would work on keeping it short, under 5 seconds, keeping it explosive, and then keep in mind of neuromuscular conditioning and replenishing full recovery ATP CP, right? So I would say, anywhere from 3, 4, 5 minutes of recovery. Full recovery, that you cannot have enough recovery when it comes to downhill sprints, because you're just going way above and beyond. Okay. And you don't want to do those kind of sprints fatigued at all. Now, I think if you're doing uphill sprints, listen, like, how many sprints do you need to do? Well, I think you could do those a little bit more tired than, say, a downhill sprint, because you could kind of train force under being fatigued and tired. Now, we're not talking about doing a gate start or even a flat ground sprint where we're basically almost mimicking the same kind of power that we produce and replicate at the BMX track. When we're talking about uphill sprints, we're talking about working on force. Okay, so if we're keeping in mind of neuromuscular conditioning, there is no neuromuscular conditioning when it comes to uphill sprints, because your legs are going slow. Think about it. The discharge is a lot slower. So if you're thinking about programming for specificity of raising peak power, the perfect mixture of force and speed, then a flat ground sprint using your race gear, and maybe even perhaps a stand start sprint on a slight downhill would be more specific. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. Thank you so much for the question. I know you got more. You have one over here as well. We'll get to that. Yeah, you said number of sprint sessions per week. When it comes to BMX sprinting, again, it's all about the context of what else you're doing in an effort to understand how many sprint sessions you need to do. Because when it comes to sprint training alone, there's all kinds of things that we could do. We could do uphill, flat ground, downhill. We could do, and that's all working within the ATP-CP phosphagen system under 10 seconds. If we're looking to improve the anaerobic lactate glycotic system, then we're talking about doing broken sprints, and that's a whole nother animal. Now, number of sprint sessions per week, I would say probably 2, and going and picking one theme for each session. Go into those sprint sessions fresh. That means if you could go in after a rest day, great. Go in fresh on those sprint sessions, and also go deep into the theme. Are we working on flat ground? Are we working on flat ground sprints and just working on dedicated peak power of force and velocity? Or are we working on strictly force or are we working on strictly force, which is basically working on uphill sprints? Okay, we talked about that. So go into your sessions fresh and go deep. Don't go in and let's, during the sprint session, let's go full buffet and do downhill and uphill and opposite foot, and let's switch it up and go from clip pedals to flat pedals and change our gear. No, just pick one thing, go deep into it, because again, sprint training is already hard enough. Why make it difficult? Master the basics. Here we go. We got a question here. David Bloor says, would a 45-minute high-intensity spin class help or hurt your BMX performance? There are sprints done throughout class, but your legs, and then there's no more question to that. Basically, he's asking, hey, would a 45-minute high-intensity spin class help or hurt BMX racing performance? Yeah, that's a great question. At the end of the day, 45 minutes high intensity. What I'm presupposing here is that the whole session's 45 minutes. You're pedaling the entire time. And then, of course, there's going to be some burst of efforts where you're pedaling for 10, 15, 20, 30, up to a minute long of high intensity. And of course, those intensities, they're probably within the range of like zone 5, zone 6, which is sometimes not necessarily all out. Listen, I think those sessions are great. And you're basically addressing the anaerobic lactate glycotic energy system. So yes, what you're doing is essentially you're raising your ability to tolerate lactic acid. So yeah, it definitely benefits that. Now, if you're looking at it as, you know what, I'm going to get fast out of the gate, be explosive out of the gate and super fast down the first straight. I'm going to do that spin class. It's 45 minutes long. It doesn't take that long. No, that's out of the realm and the parameters of neuromuscular conditioning. So when it comes to sprint training, you want to think about specificity. You want to think about specificity. You want to think about specific energy systems. You want to heed caution. You want to heed caution to neuromuscular conditioning, straight up, because you guys are very specific, high maximum output sprinting athletes. Usain Bolt, who is a specialist in the 100 and the 200 meter sprint races, okay, the 100 being 10 seconds, the 200 being 20 seconds. There is no 40-second hurdle race, except I believe the 800 meter hurdle would probably be the equivalent of a BMX race. That probably takes around 40 to 50 seconds to complete. Someone needs to Google that and drop that in the message. But think about it. Usain Bolt isn't doing sprint classes. I'm sorry. Usain Bolt isn't doing spin classes, right? Imagine if there was a spin class for runners where they jump on a treadmill and they're jogging, and then it's like, all right, go. And then, they go all out for a minute, and then they rest, and then they rest 30 seconds, and they go again for a minute. No, he's not doing that. He's not. He's a sprinting athlete. BMXers are sprinting athletes. They're being very specific. They're thinking about neuromuscular conditioning. They're thinking about programming, okay? They're thinking about energy pathways. If you're just not going to reach your maximum potential doing a spin class. If you're thinking about maximizing your potential of a gate start maximum power, both force and velocity, ain't going to happen. But great question though, and a great way to improve, again, that anaerobic lactate glycotic energy system, which is your ability to tolerate lactic acid and raising that ceiling. Just be smart on how often you do that, right? Once every few weeks isn't going to hurt you. Absolutely not. Darlene Prisbury. Did I say that properly? Darlene Prisbury says, is using a sprint block better, or could I lean up against a wall for sprints? Yeah, basically that's almost the same thing, right? Like the difference between a sprint block. Now, when you're talking about a sprint block, are you talking about one of these? Hold on a second, let me show you. Are you talking about one of these? Or are you talking about the brand sprint block? The one that kind of slides back as you go forward. Yeah, Darlene says, what I'm learning from this is I need to change my workout routine. Yeah, man. Jason P says, thank you for answering my question. Super informative. Hey, we got a super chat as well. So if you guys want to donate to the channel, it helps with camera equipment and all kinds of different stuff I want to do on this channel, man. That would be great. Jacob James says, hi, coach. Nice to see you. Got here late to the party. Hope everyone else doing well. Hey, Jacob, hope you're doing well. It's good to see your smiling face. Darlene says, I'm talking about a small stool. So Darlene says, I hope, please forgive me, Darlene. See, I'm thinking of Darlene. I'm thinking of a hockey player. His last name's Darlene, so please forgive me. He plays for the Buffalo Sabres. Super random, but He's talking about doing a sprint off a stool like that, or or something kind of like this, right? Like that kind of stool right there. That kind of stool. Yeah, so basically, is using a sprint block better, or could I lean up against a wall for sprints? Now, they both have their benefits, they both have their pros and cons. I like using the block if I'm going to if I'm going to do like, if I'm going to work on my second pedal and maybe start opposite foot. Leaning up your handlebar up against a wall or a pole, which I've done in the past, is probably a little bit more natural, right? Because when you go forward, Newton's third law, for every reaction, there's an opposite and equal reaction. You're actually going to get that natural benefit of that reaction you're going to get that natural feel of the bike going backwards as you're going forward, and you have to be able to react on that reaction itself. So that's a little bit more natural. And if you guys look at sprint blocks, that's the whole purpose of that, which is way harder to do, and people don't like doing it because you actually kind of feel slow doing it. But at the end of the day, it's more of a force reaction exercise than anything at all. Now, if you were to use a normal block, then you're going to be able to get into position of like your second and third and fourth pedal for the first 4 full cranks right off the hop. So try them both and report back. That's what I would do. They both have their benefits. I do all kinds of sprints. I don't discriminate. I do them all. Let's see, Rob Thiel says, thoughts on spin class? Rob, we just covered that. And he says, yeah, his question was answered by Dave's. Okay, what other questions do we have? I got to go back to the top. Jake Baker says, can I do sprints on clips? Yeah, absolutely. Now, if you're looking to improve force, then you could do them on flat pedals, right? If you're a racer that's old enough to race with clips and you already race with clips, yeah, absolutely. I think that you guys should be doing sprints on flat pedals. And at the same time, there's also a time and place to do them with clips, right? If you're thinking about neuromuscular conditioning and you want to program yourself, I've been crazy enough to where it's like, I'm doing flat pedals earlier in the week, and I'm going to do big gear flat pedal sprints to work on more force. And then, of course, as I get closer to the race, I might even go a tooth lower than my typical race gear and throw on clip pedals and force myself to produce more velocity, right? And force myself to react faster, thinking about neuromuscular conditioning. I've done that kind of stuff, and it's helpful. And going back to my normal race gear, I felt great. Giving you guys some secrets here. What other questions do we have? Darlene Prisby says, thanks for all the info. My friends are bullying me to go to the gym. Yeah, man, get to the gym. If you got to go now, go. But if you're just saying this in general, like, hey, you don't go to the gym and you need to be going to the gym. Yeah, man, going to the gym is really key. I love the gym, and I think we talked about the gym maybe 2 live sessions before this. Jacob James has a question. He says, I've been doing my interval roller sprints seated. Should I be standing instead while sprinting? I can spin up pretty fast while seated and feel more comfortable on the saddle. Yeah, I've seen a lot of different varieties and variations of sprinting with rollers. Me personally, I'm a guy that likes to stand up because being seated and sprinting doesn't really make any sense to me. Number one, I like being able to be in that sprint position and force myself to be in that effective acceleration and sprinting position with my shoulders over the handlebar grips. And when I'm seated, I'm just not doing that. I'm seated, right? I'm seated. I'm not. And when you're sprinting seated, you're not really benefiting from your own body weight, right? And at the same time, when you're seated, you're not able to get a full extension through the hip, knee, and ankle joint, right? And so I like standing up. Now, I've seen people work on top end leg speed being seated, and I'm just not a fan. I don't have any of my athletes doing that. If I'm working on top end leg speed and they're having a hard time staying on rollers, then we're going to switch up the protocol. I'm just going to send them on the road, send them downhill, and work on your top end leg speed that way. Now, my other question would be, for what purpose do you want to be seated? Do you have any idea as to why you want to be seated sprinting? Now, if you're a track athlete, like a velodrome athlete, or even a road athlete, like I do sprint seated, but I do that to save my energy, right? So when I do come out of the saddle, I have a lot more juice left. Okay, so what does that mean? So, in road cycling, a race, if it's, a 1 kilometer to go, typically about, 400 or 500 meters out from the finish line, I'm in the saddle sprinting, and I'm sprinting pretty darn hard, right? I can sprint probably 1,000 watts for easily 5 to 7 seconds in the saddle, or even longer in the saddle. But I'm doing that with the purpose of having that ATP CP for the kill at the end of the last 50 meters. So that's the reason why I'm seated. But for what purpose are you guys? Okay, so Jacob says for stability. Yeah, fair enough. So Jacob says he stays seated for stability on doing sprints. Fair enough. If that's the case, I try to work on your stability standing up. I think it's more specific. I'm all about specificity. I'm all about neuromuscular conditioning. I'm all about doing exactly what you guys need to do on a BMX track, and that's just it. What other questions do we have, man? You guys done really good, man. We've gone well over 60 minutes. I'll take 1 or 2 more questions, and then I'm going to go ahead and get some dinner. It's 6:30 over here. The sun is down. Here we go. We have another question coming from Jason P. Jason P says, is using a home gate pro start as opposed to a sprint block for sprints as effective or best to keep sprint days off the gate? Okay, so basically what are you saying here? You're basically asking me if you have a gate at home, can you integrate, are you basically sprinting while doing gates at home? Yes, the answer is absolutely yes. Now, what are you doing specifically? When you're doing gates and you're working in acceleration. So yes, I like that. The thing with sprinting is that you guys get to work on raw acceleration power without the need of having to do a gate start technique before that. Yeah, man, that's the whole thing with sprinting, right? Even if you were to use a block, right? Even if you were to do a stand start with this is going to enable you to focus on your second, third, fourth half crank coming out of the gate. That first 30 feet out of the gate, those first 2 full cranks are so critical in developing and maximizing your efficiency and your maximum potential power. A gate start might get in the way of that, right? Like you could go a little bit deeper without having to do a gate start and focusing on a gate start if you're for the purpose of wanting to develop your maximum acceleration power down that starting hill. Now, has it been argued that it doesn't make sense to do sprints, just do gates? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I get it. But again, if you could go deeper if you don't do the gate. Now, I think you could do the gate, work on technique, right? Work on technique, work on your acceleration, 2 birds with 1 stone. Absolutely. I think it's fantastic. And maybe perhaps another day you could go a little bit deeper and maybe do some opposite foot box sprints. So if you're doing gates at home and then you're also doing sprints at home on a different day, then if you're doing sprints on that different day, then start with the opposite foot forward, right? Because you already did regular foot forward sprints doing the gates. So that's a great way for you guys to integrate both gait starts and also sprint training. Oh, hey, man, Jacob James got $10 in the super chat. Thank you very much. We'll definitely use that towards equipment. Man, internet cost, all kinds of different stuff. Any other questions? We have one more. We'll take this one. This one looks pretty good. Let's see. Edwin Alvarez. Thank you very much for coming in. Edwin Alvarez says, lifting to failure to gain strength versus doing consecutive weight reps sets. Which would you do first to get ready for a race or the season? Do you want to try to run higher gearing for max speed? Okay, that's a lot of different questions. I think I've read like 3 different things in there. First off, we'll address lifting to failure to gain strength. Okay, yeah, so lifting to failure to gain strength, I think that's great, especially if you're a well-conditioned athlete. That means you're seasoned, you're in the gym, you've been in the season, you've been in the gym training sessions, 3 or 4 or 5 seasons of lifting, right? And when I mean 3 or 4 or 5 seasons of lifting, I'm talking, if you started lifting around 13 years old and now all of a sudden you're 18 and you're used to weightlifting, yeah, I think it's important for you guys to have some kind of base fitness and of strength if you guys are going to hop in and lift to failure every time. Now, do I think it's good? Yes. Do I think it's necessary? Not all the time. I think it's good to test yourself to failure probably once every 3 weeks, right? Once a month, once every 3 or 4 weeks. You guys don't need to do it every week because number one, it takes a lot of energy, concentration physically, and also mentally and emotionally. It takes a lot, and shoot, even sometimes spiritually, right? Lifting in itself requires, it's a coordinated skill of both, not only, if you're doing a squat, for example, not only are you working on obviously the lower body, but you're working on holding on to the bar, keeping your core tight, lower body strength, lowering it effectively. If you could lower the weight, then you could raise the weight. And then of course, trying to explode as fast as you can, although the weight doesn't appear to be moving fast. Lifting heavy weight, it takes a lot. There's a lot going on. I mean, my mind just kind of blows apart thinking about it, man, because it's tough. So I think you're probably better off staying within that 85 to 90% range, right? Now, that's for developing force. If you want to develop specific power, you could actually, you guys could actually lower the weight to like maybe even 40 to 50% and do speed squats and focus on exploding, like doing a speed squat with a box, getting down on the box and exploding up as fast as you can, and maybe even putting bands into the equation to where you guys are firing through progressive resistance. You guys, that's a little bit more specificity. I think you guys will get a lot more out of that. It's going to require concentration, the same concentration that you need to do a maximum powerful gait start out of the gate, as opposed to having all this heavy weight being crunched at the bottom and then trying to survive and get out of the hole. I mean, that's really tough to do, man. Don't get me wrong. We do that kind of work, but we don't do it to failure every time. And usually we'll have a spotter. Okay. So I hope that makes sense. Edwin, I appreciate the super chat. He says, hype, $5. I really appreciate you guys, man. This is awesome. I really, really appreciate it. And then he also says, he wants to try to run higher gearing for maximum speed. Okay, so does that mean making your gear harder so you could reach a top speed? Now keep in mind, we've talked about this all the time, right? Going up in gear in an effort to reach top speed, you're going to be compromising your ability to come out of the gate. You need more strength. Your gate start technique's going to change. You're going to be moving slower, and you're going to have to recruit more than what you normally do, right? Like we're trained to and programmed to do specific movements very specifically, just like a phone app is trained to open a certain way. If I were to open up YouTube, boom, it pops up, right? It pops up. Oh, there's a. Okay, so it's trained, right? It's programmed. If we were to change, if now if I were to try to run and impose, I don't know, like let's say this stream that I'm running right now, I'm streaming to YouTube. If we want to add more demands and try to stream to Facebook at the same time simultaneously, I'm putting a bigger load on my computer, which is only programmed to really to be effective, right? To be effective to stream to YouTube only. I've tried streaming to YouTube and Facebook and I crashed the computer. The computer couldn't handle it. So it's really efficient and programmed to stream to one platform. Now, if we were to go higher up in gear in an effort to get top speed, to raise your top speed, you might do it, but you might be 2 or 3 places back, right? You might be slower out of the gate down the first straight. And by the time you reach top speed, the race is already in front of you. So in an effort to reach top speed, you got to train top speed. Okay, hopefully that helps. David Bloor, $20 for the super chat. Man, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I'm super grateful for you guys for donating to the channel. It helps the channel, helps out with expenses, man. Awesome stuff. He says, thanks for saying spin every few weeks so my wife won't make me go all the time. Oh, man. Well, let's put that up here. Let's put that up here. Yep, $20 from David. He says, thanks for saying spin every few weeks. Yeah, every few weeks, right? You guys are sprinting athletes. You guys are not spin cycling athletes. You're not a spin instructor. Great stuff. And then, of course, thank you very much for the $10 from Jacob, man. I really appreciate you. And then Jason P. Thank you very much. I appreciate the questions, man. I really do. And he says, makes sense to keep it specific as you explained. Thank you again. Yeah, man, guys, awesome stuff. You guys really challenged me. A really, really good session today. Listen, I think we can go deeper into sprint training, right? Like we only really scratched the surface, you know, talking about you guys being sprint training athletes, talking about neuromuscular conditioning, and then talking about the energy pathways, right? The ATP, CP, adenosine triphosphate, creatine phosphate system, and then of course the anaerobic lactate glycotic system, right? I'm glad you guys are starting to figure this out, understanding the difference of being super specific coming out of the gate, and then of course, you know, not being specific, like going to and doing a spin class and wondering, well, how does that work, right? Like these are great questions, and you guys are really, with these questions, you guys are helping out hundreds of other BMXers. So I'm really grateful for you guys to even show up. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to be your coach. You guys have a wonderful night. Let's talk more and go deeper into sprint training next week. We'll talk about, you know, different sprint training protocols, starting protocols, how many sprints we need to do. Like no one even brought that up. How many sprints? We talk about sprint sessions, but how many, right? We touched on how much recovery time, but how many sprints do we need to do? Let's talk about that next week. We'll keep working on ways to get you guys even faster down that first straight all the way around the track, grabbing the whole shot, staying ahead of the competition, and winning more races. That's what this community is all about, helping you guys being faster and helping each other. Again, when you guys go to the track, think of me, get some nachos. I'm kidding. But yeah, if someone does get some nachos, let me know how it goes. I do miss the old fashioned, you know, that nacho cheese with chips, and then, you know, having some kind of drink like a Gatorade and shooting the shit with, oops, I swear, forgive me, shooting the crap with other fellow BMXers. Looking forward to going to a BMX race this year. Let me know where you guys are racing next. And you guys, again, have a wonderful week. Keep sprinting. You guys have all the reasons and all the empowerment to do so. Keep it specific. And again, keep going fast. Keep showing up. Keep bringing the joy. Keep being empowered when you go to the track. You guys are more powerful than what you think you are. You guys keep up the great work, and I'll see you guys next week. Super grateful for the opportunity to be your coach. You guys have a good one.